Speaker is Kanchan Gupta. Kanchan Gupta is Senior Advisor, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India. He is a veteran journalist who has held senior editorial positions in various leading newspapers, including The Telegraph, The Statesman, and The Pioneer, and news channels. He is a widely read commentator on current affairs. He has served in the Prime Minister's office on the National Security Advisory Board as Director of Maulana Azad Center of Indian Culture, Cairo, and Chairman of Raja Ram Mohan Roy Library Foundation. He was a distinguished fellow at Observer Research Foundation. Kanchan Gupta will now speak on the colonized mind at 75.
We begin at 5 to 4, right? Who's keeping the time? 5 to 4. Yeah, but we are starting at 5 to 4. Yeah. Namaskar to everybody. I am grateful to the organizers of Pondi Literature Festival for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I am not much of a speaker or a thinker, but I will try and look at where do we stand as we celebrate 75 years of our independence. How decolonized are we? Or are we decolonized at all? And so let me take you back to a piece of paper which was written in 1835. It was called The Minute on Indian Education. And it was penned by someone who really had nothing to do with education. He was basically an account keeper for the East India Company. That's Thomas Babington Macaulay. And the thrust of the minute was that everything that is Indian, every knowledge that is Indian, must be wiped out, it must be set aside, and a new Indian mind has to be crafted based on the principle that a single shelf of a good European library is worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. So beginning with that presumption, the effort was directed at creating a class of natives. And the reason I use the word natives is that we were quite happy to be called natives. And we sort of accepted that the white man was here to civilize the savage. So that was the self-loathing perception which we had. And that point onwards, the creation of an educated class that that was totally deracinated, that was totally rootless. That project begins and continues till independence happens. So what did they create? They created clerks, they created collaborators, they created cohabitors, and they created, to use a Marxist term, or what came to be known as the comprador bourgeoisie. So it was a very considered attempt to craft an Indian mind that would be unquestioning, that would be self-loathing, and that would look towards the West for all sustenance. Now, the colonizing of the Indian mind gathers speed after 1857. East India Company goes, suzerainty and sovereignty transfers to the British Crown, and the effort to colonize the Indian also becomes that much more, because the empire's exercise or the empire's enterprise was not only to extract, it was also to implant, extract resources and implant ideas that would legitimize the process of that extraction. And tangentially, what happens is that we start believing that the only source of enlightenment is European enlightenment. And we look towards Europe for enlightenment, which was sad and tragic at once, because before that, prior to that, this land was looked at as the source of enlightenment. So, this gradual process of colonization, you had Rule Britannia. So, Rule Britannia did not only rule the waves, it came to rule our mindscape, our minds. And we could not look beyond that. We could not look either to the left of it or the right of it. A brief interlude happens when, during the Bengal Renaissance, and you had Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who sort of initiates the process. And then it is followed up by other luminaries. You had Rabindranath Tagore, you had a whole host of scientists, you had Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and they were trying to recapture the space that was vacated by the colonized mind. But as I said, it was a very brief interlude. Now, I will take a diversion over here. Recently, I was in Kolkata at an event organized by India Today, and there was a Bengali professor with me. His politics really is inconsequential, but he's a learned person. And the subject of the discussion was that why is Hindutva antithetical to Bengali culture? or Bengal's culture. So the point which I made was that it's very surprising that we should talk in terms of Hindutva being antithetical to Bengal's culture or Bengali culture or Bengali identity. Because Hindutva, the idea, the core concept of Hindutva, took shape and form in Bengal. And that was much before anybody else was talking about it. We had Rajnarayan Basu, who wrote something called the Prospectus of a Society for the Promotion of National Feeling Among the Educated Natives of Bengal. So again, this was an effort to decolonize the mind and try and inculcate values, thoughts, perceptions which were rooted in the soil of the country. And in response to that, Nabagopal Mitro, of whom very few would have heard, he founded something called the Hindu Mela, which began as the Choitro Mela. Again, all was trying to mobilize Hindus, the Hindu Samaj, either through reforms or through tradition or through religious practices. And here we are talking about that Hindutva is antithetical to Bengali culture, Bengali identity. The Chandrakanto Basu, when he wrote Hindutva or Hindur Prokrito Itihas, he was sitting in Bengal and he was crystallizing what makes a Hindu Hindu, why is a Hindu Hindu, and where does a Hindu stand today and where does he go from here in the coming days? And this we are talking of 1860s. And yet we talk in terms of Hindutva being antithetical. And the perception, I think, is that Hindutva is antithetical to all of India. And that this thought comes because our minds have been colonized to an extent that we self-loathe everything that we stand for. We self-loathe our very identity, and we self-loathe the fact that we sort of exist as a Samaj. Sadly, the decolonization, much academic work has been done on post-colonial politics, post-colonial economics, post-colonial social restructuring. But between 1947 and 2022, frankly, the core of the colonized mind remains untouched, it remains unrestructured, and it remains unreformed. To a great extent, and although I have myself gone to a Christian missionary school and later a Christian missionary college, I have no doubt in my mind, to a great extent, the project to colonize the Indian mind, while it may have been a political project to begin with, and later became a compulsion of the empire, it was greatly supported by Christian missionaries because they felt they were obliged to serve God by serving the empire's cause. And the colonization of young minds, which then happens in Christian missionary schools, in Christian missionary colleges, in Christian missionary homes, it's amazing. One could go into the details, but we really don't have the time to do that. The colonized mind changed the way we look at our society, at our politics, at our economics, our culture, and every perversion that happens, even after the British leave the country, the colonized mind continues to legitimize that perversion. Two examples, we talk of Swaraj, other speakers here have spoken about Swaraj, but 1947 does not lead us to Swaraj. It was basically an extension of colonial rule, but with native rulers. And the manner in which our constitution was framed, it begins with we the people. But who were the people who actually framed the constitution? Did they really represent we the people? Someone who goes to Harrow as a child, then goes to Oxford or to Cambridge, he cannot be representing the India of those days. So the Constitution, the basis of the first foundation of the Republic, itself remains a deeply flawed document. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that I do not swear allegiance to the Constitution. For better or for worse, this is my Constitution and I swear allegiance to it. But I have serious reasons to question the further perversions which happen. You amend the Constitution to include the word socialist and secular. Which was totally needless. In any case, the shaping of ideology was also a doing, or ideological affiliations was also a doing of the colonized mind. It was the colonized mind which sort of made us install Lenin, Stalin, Marx, Engels as our resident deities. It is the colonized mind which sort of made us look at the socialist world with great wonder. And again, it is the colonized mind which comes up with this great Indian rope trick that unless you mention the word secular in the preamble of the Constitution, India won't be a secular republic. This is a land, scholars who know way more than me, they have spoken on Sanatan Dharma. This is the land of Sanatan Dharma, which has, it's a civilizational nation. We are not a modern nation state. We are not we are way different from European nations. We are way different from America. This nation was not created and then populated with people who became nationals, and then using those nationals, we did not create a nationalism. So for a civilizational state which has existed for millennia, which has absorbed people from all over the world, to try and suggest or regulate them, or regulate this nation by inserting the word secular in the Constitution, that's actually a crime that you committed against the very essence, the very idea of Indian nationhood. Recently, we saw this spectacular scene in a courtroom where a judge rebukes a bureaucrat. Is this the way you dress? Is this the way you dress and come to my court? Don't you have any common sense? Don't you follow rules? Now, all that the poor man had done was that he was wearing a pair of full-sleeve shirts and trousers. But the judge insisted that he should have appeared in court in a tie and a jacket. And when you look at our judges decked up like Christmas trees, which world, which era do we live in? We refer to them as my lord. The law does not allow you and me to accept the queen's honor and append the word Lord before our name. It doesn't. The law does not even allow you to use Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan along with your name, either as a prefix or a suffix. That's for the people of India. And for the judges, they are lords. You have lawyers who wear ridiculous robes in summer, in the height of summer, to appear in court. So, it's very easy to say this is legal tradition. But tradition borrowed from whom? From where? Definitely not a tradition that was born in India. Another point which often agitates me is the manner in which people with a colonized mind have treated Sanskrit. It was seen as a language that represents regressive values. Oh, it's a language of Hindus, of Hindu revivalists, and therefore we must shun it. And shun it for what? We must shun it for Hindustani, which is way different from Hindi. Correct Hindi is extremely Sanskritized. We must shun it for Urdu, which is a bastard language born in the mehfils of the Mughal era. And yet we will not promote Sanskrit. We will not try and explore the idea of making or reviving Sanskrit as a transnational language. Because our rulers, then and now are extremely, and when I say rulers, it doesn't necessarily mean people who are in power. It means the political leadership across the spectrum. They are extremely uncomfortable. They are discomfited by Sanskrit. Now, why do you think only the first stanza of Vande Mataram was used or adopted as the national song? Because for most of them, for Mr. Nehru, it would have been a tongue twister. I mean, you expect me to stand there and pronounce these words? What do you think I am? Even for a national anthem, the original version has 5 stanzas. And you pare it down to the first stanza, which is actually only the opening stanza. Why? Oh, you expect me to stand at attention for 3 minutes or 4 minutes? But for God Save the Queen or God Save the King, they would happily have done it because all of them they had no problems with the empire or the emperor. They just wanted to be considered as equals on the high table. That we must get our share of the pie. And lastly, how much time do we have? 5 minutes. Lastly, I will just round this off, and this is something about which I increasingly feel very strongly. The colonized mind has caused enormous damage, almost irreversible damage to the growth, development, and contribution of technology. What have we achieved really? We have US tech, which dominates most of the world, including Europe. US tech, and you have a very minor player, the Euro tech. And then you have China tech. Where is India tech? We don't even have an incipient India tech. Yet, the government, in all fairness, tried its best. Prime land was allocated. Endless years of tax breaks were given. Labor laws were suspended, the only industry for which labor laws were suspended, including hire and fire. There was no shop floor protection which was enforced. And despite that, Indian IT companies, what have they achieved? They have not been able to set up substantial manufacturing over here. All they have done is that they have created an architecture. So there is a flight. I mean, there was a time when India would provide coolies to work in the sugarcane plantations of the empire. So today we provide, and I really don't mean any malice when I use this term, today we provide tech coolies to the world to further their technology, to create technology that is designed for use of, benefit of, to serve the West, not to serve the rest of the world, not to serve the South, the global South, or the global East. Technology that is accessible to India today is not designed for India. It is not designed to meet India's needs. And as the Ukraine war has shown, we as a country are totally vulnerable as far as technology is concerned. Tomorrow, if for whatever reason the West takes a dislike towards us, not that they like us, but if they were to take a particular dislike towards us, they can do to us what they did to Russia. Your payment systems would be stopped, your access to Google would be stopped, your access to social media platforms would be stopped, your access to all kinds of technological services would be stopped. So shouldn't we be asking those of our IT companies which have minted billions of rupees, unimaginable wealth, what have you done for India? Okay, there is services inflow. That is money, and all money is needed. But beyond that, what is the sustainable contribution that you have made to India? And I don't blame them. Even today, technology or the world of technology in India right now is dominated by the colonial mind, and we worship the West as the great innovator. We worship West as the great entrepreneur, and therefore we must serve them. I had thought of quoting a line from Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpara speech, and it has already been quoted extensively over last evening and today, but nonetheless, so Sri Aurobindo, and it's not because I greatly understand the Uttarpara speech. I come from Uttarpara. And this was something which we have been hearing of and reading since we were children. And Uttarpara, incidentally, was in the forefront of resisting the colonization of the Indian mind. So the Zamindar of Uttarpara, he actually set up a public library. And in those days, a non-government public library was unthinkable. And Sri Aurobindo was one of the guests who was invited to speak over there. So in his speech, he says, India is rising to shed the eternal light entrusted to her over the world so many decades ago. It's actually only now that India is rising. India is rising globally, India is rising regionally, it is rising in terms of geography, in terms of economic clout, in terms of opportunity, investment destination, everything. India possibly never had everything so good going for it. And as India rises, I think if we try and rediscover our origins in Sanatan Dharma, we can try, at least make an attempt to try and decolonize our minds. Thank you very much.